What's up, Steelers Nation? Another week is here, and of course, we've got plenty to unpack when it comes to the black and gold. There's been a lot of chatter over the weekend, and some important updates that could shape the direction of the team for this upcoming season. So sit tight, grab your terrible towel, and let's dive right in. First, let's talk about that big report that dropped over the weekend. There was a lot of buzz recently about the Steelers possibly being in the hunt for star cornerback hire Alexander, but according to a new update from ESPN, that's just not the case. Jeremy Fowler, a pretty reliable source when it comes to league insiders, made it clear that the Steelers weren't even on Alexander's radar before he agreed to sign with the Baltimore Ravens. The teams that were actually in the mix, the Ravens, obviously, since that's where he landed, plus the Atlanta Falcons and the Miami Dolphins, no mention whatsoever of Pittsburgh, despite some whispers a couple of weeks ago that suggested otherwise. Now, what does this really mean? There are a couple of ways to look at it. Either the Steelers never made a serious push for Alexander, meaning they just weren't interested, or Alexander himself had zero interest in coming to Pittsburgh. One theory floating around is that the Steelers might have wanted Alexander to play in the slot, which hasn't exactly been his role throughout his career. We've talked about this on the channel before, how the Steelers could be planning to use Yulen Ramsay as their nickel defender, with guys like Darius Slay and Joey Porter Jr. holding things down on the outside. If that's the case, it's reasonable to assume that Pittsburgh would have had similar plans for Alexander, and let's be honest, a guy like him, who's been almost exclusively an outside corner his entire career, probably wasn't thrilled at the idea of moving inside, and honestly, this whole update does throw some cold water on those earlier reports suggesting that the Steelers were sniffing around both Alexander and Ramsay. If they weren't in on Alexander, it naturally raises the question, are they really serious about Yulen Ramsay either? Now, personally, I still think there's a shot that Ramsay ends up in Pittsburgh. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I believe the front office knows that adding a player like Ramsay could be a game changer for the secondary. But yeah, this latest report definitely adds some doubt. The other thing to consider here is geography. The teams most often linked to Ramsay lately, they're all on the West Coast. The Chargers, the Rams, teams like that. So that's something to monitor. But for what it's worth, Ricky, who's been on top of this story for a while, is still standing firm that the Steelers are interested in Ramsay. Whether that turns into something real in the coming days remains to be seen. But it's definitely a storyline we're going to keep following closely. Now, shifting gears for a second, let's dive into the money side of things with Yulen Ramsay. This is where it gets really interesting and honestly a little complicated. There's been a lot of stuff floating around online, numbers being thrown out on Twitter, rumors spreading fast, and I want to make sure everyone has the facts straight. So here's the deal. If the Steelers were to pull the trigger and trade for Ramsay, his cap hit for this season would sit just under $6 million. That's right, less than $6 million against the cap for this year. And that number covers everything: his base salary, a prorated portion of his option bonus, workout bonuses, the whole package. But here's the kicker: even though his cap hit is relatively low for this year, the Steelers would still be on the hook to pay Ramsay $21.1 million in actual cash for this season. Almost $19 million of that comes from an option bonus. That kicks in right at the start of week 1. So yeah, while the cap implications aren't terrible, there's a huge upfront financial commitment involved. And let's not forget, the Steelers also have the looming TJ Watt extension hanging over them. When that deal gets done, there's going to be a ton of guaranteed money heading Watt's way, likely in the form of a massive signing bonus. That's a lot of cash the front office will need to come up with. Plus, they already shelled out big bucks earlier this offseason to lock down DK Metcalf with that blockbuster trade-in extension. So adding Ramsay's $21 million cash obligation on top of all that, that's no small ask, especially for a team like the Steelers, who historically haven't been one of the NFL's big spenders in terms of upfront cash flow. Now, here's where negotiations with Miami could get creative. The Dolphins are already on the hook for a big chunk of Ramsay's existing signing bonus. What Pittsburgh might be trying to do right now is work out a deal where Miami eats a portion of that $21 million cash hit for this year. In other words, Pittsburgh could say, hey, we'll give you a draft pick, but only if you agree to take on part of this financial burden. The Dolphins might be open to that, especially if it helps them clear cap space or get some long-term Flexibility. So what kind of draft pick would we be talking about here? If Miami agrees to take on some of Ramsay's salary, I could definitely see the Steelers offering a 4th-round pick. Remember, Pittsburgh has multiple 4th-rounders heading into the 2026 NFL Draft, so they've got some wiggle room there. That would make sense for both sides. Miami gets some draft capital. Pittsburgh lands a proven corner, and both teams work around their financial constraints. Also, from a pure cap space perspective, the Steelers could absolutely fit Ramsay onto the roster right now. According to Over the Cap, Pittsburgh currently has around $18.8 million in available cap space for this season, and with Ramsay's cap hit being just $5.9 million, they'd still have nearly $13 million left over after the trade. That's plenty of room to make another move, maybe for a wide receiver, or to stash some flexibility for in-season needs like injuries or trade deadline deals. So yeah, financially, it's doable. The real question is whether the Steelers are willing to part with the draft capital, and whether Miami's willing to eat some of that salary. That's what's being discussed behind closed doors right now. We'll just have to wait and see how it all plays out. And speaking of Plan B options, if the Steelers don't land Yulen Ramsay, there's another name that's starting to pop up, a guy who's very familiar to Steelers fans, Mike Hilton. Yep, the former Pittsburgh slot corner is still out there in free agency, and there's some growing buzz about a potential reunion. According to a recent piece from Bleacher Report, Pittsburgh is seen as a logical landing spot for Hilton, especially if the team strikes out on Ramsay. Now, personally, I would have been on board with bringing Hilton back even earlier in free agency. He knows this defense, he knows the system, and let's not forget, he was a huge part of this secondary during his first 4 seasons with the team. From 2017 to 2020, Hilton was one of the most productive slot corners in the entire league. We're talking 9.5 sacks, 7 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, and over 30 pass breakups during that stretch. That kind of production from the slot corner position, you just don't see that every day. And honestly, ever since Hilton left, Pittsburgh struggled to fill that role. The guys they've brought in since then just haven't lived up to the standard he set. If you look at the advanced metrics, like Pro Football Focus grades, again, not the be-all end-all, but a useful tool, Hilton's numbers are solid. His best graded season was actually his rookie year with the Steelers, but even in Cincinnati, he kept that level of play going. 3 out of his 4 years with the Bengals, he graded out above 70, including a 75.9 last season. For a slot corner, that's pretty darn good. Compare that to Beanie Bishop Jr., Pittsburgh's current second-year slot corner, and it's a night and day difference. Hilton's PFF grade was over 20 points higher than Bishop's last season. And beyond the numbers, Hilton brings experience, leadership, and that hard-nosed physicality that Mike Tomlin absolutely loves in his defensive backs. He's a willing tackler, he's aggressive in run support, and he's got that dog mentality you want in the slot. Now, yes, he's getting older, but when you're talking about a short-term solution, especially if the Ramsay deal falls through, I think Hilton makes a ton of sense. So if I'm sitting in the front office, I'm at least making the call to see what it would take to bring him back. All right, Steelers Nation. That wraps up this first chunk of today's breakdown. Stick around because up next we're diving into a Bleacher Report article that links for potential trade candidates to the Steelers. Some of these names you're gonna love, others not so much, but before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. There's a whisper making its way through NFL circles. A rumor that could send shockwaves across the league if it proves true. Baker Mayfield, the former No. 1 overall pick, is reportedly on the cusp of signing a 3-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. While nothing has been officially confirmed by either the Steelers organization or Mayfield's camp, the scuttlebutt suggests that negotiations have progressed significantly, leading to a strong possibility of the quarterback landing in the Steel City. The notion of Mayfield, known for his fiery competitiveness and gunslinging style, donning the black and gold, has certainly ignited discussions among fans and analysts alike. This potential move would be a fascinating pivot for the Steelers, who have been navigating a post-Ben Roethlisberger era with a focus on developing their younger talent. Adding a seasoned yet still relatively young signal caller like Mayfield could provide a different dynamic to their offense, potentially injecting a new level of excitement and experience into the quarterback room. His ability to extend plays and deliver under pressure could be a compelling fit for the Steelers' offensive scheme, which often emphasizes a strong running game and opportunistic passing, of course. The NFL rumor mill is a constantly churning machine, and until pens hit paper, it remains just that, a rumor. However, the sheer buzz surrounding this potential signing indicates that it's more than just idle speculation. If Mayfield does indeed ink a deal with Pittsburgh, it would undoubtedly be one of the most talked about offseason moves and set the stage for an intriguing new chapter in his career and for the Steelers' future. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.